Welcome to the International Mentoring Community, All Things Mentoring Lounge. It's wonderful to be here with you. My name is Dr. Stephen Hobbs. I am one of the co-founders of the International Mentoring Community. My other co-founder, Doug Lawrence, isn't able to join us today. He is off in the mountains enjoying himself, and I wish him well for the day. Actually, for the week. What we're going to be doing is looking at safe space for mentoring conversation, otherwise feel disconnected. That was the title we assigned to it. And it came about because of conversations, questions that are being asked over the last couple of weeks. And part of it is because of videos we've shot, other Wednesday morning mentoring lounge videos, and people have been asking us from different perspectives, what is this notion of a safe space for mentoring conversation? So when I had a conversation with Doug about planning out for today, we said, well, why don't we get into this conversation? I said, okay, if we're going to do that, then what I'd like to do is I'm going to use 3 words that will bring the story together. And those 3 words are connection, conversion, and completion. And where they come from is about setting up an online course or a workshop, is that you have to make connection with someone so that you can do a conversion. In other words, that they're willing to pay some money to get into it, into the course, into the workshop, and that they get to a point of completion. Unfortunately, the record of those who connect and convert and get to completion is dismal, and there's a lot of people attempting to fill in that hole to guide people who are offering workshops and courses to get people to actually do the completion of the learning that they have taken from the course, so that they're taking the learning and putting it into action. So I said to myself, and then shared with Doug, I said, what would happen if I used those 3 words and looked at this topic through that lens? And he said, go for it. And I said, sure. So that's where we are today. And just to also let you know, is that there is a Quora question on this, this broadcast. Doug's not here. He's the one who always brings the Quora question in. I will make some updated announcements about where we're going with IMC at the conclusion of this sharing with you. So let's get started. Now, when the mentee comes to mentoring, it's because the mentee often feels disconnected with themselves or with others, or from the whole. It could be the workplace, it could be just in life in general. So words like they feel lost, or they're stuck, or they're searching for something, and some people will put life purpose with that, but they might be searching for a new job. They might be searching for just a way to get out of the routine that they find themselves in. They're sort of challenged in their own thinking that there must be another way of going through things. The motions that I'm using now just don't seem to be working, or they might even feel lonely and looking to find ways in which to break out of that. They've noticed that it's lonely, not being in solitude where they're enjoying themselves, but they're actually feeling lonely. And generally, often what I hear when I'm sharing with people is I hear a phrase like, I feel disconnected. And I go, oh, okay. So I'm going, okay, if that's the case, from a mentoring point of view, this notion of a 2-way trusted strategic alliance where you're in a collaborative conversation with someone, and you're going to both benefit personally and professionally. So using this mentoring lens for the presentation here, but you can extend this out into other educating approaches as well. But this is more of an emphasis from mentoring, because this is the All Things Mentoring Lounge. So An important aspect here is the mentors have to meet the mentees where the mentees are when they are meeting them. Because if a mentee is feeling lost, stuck, searching, lonely, the mentor has to meet them where they're at in that sort of the space and place, because if they don't, they're not demonstrating empathy, but more so, they're not coming at mentoring from a wholehearted perspective, or they're not coming at it from an open perspective, or even a place of vulnerability. What they're doing is they're actually possibly presenting to the mentee. They're confused, and that's not how a mentor should be entering into a mentoring strategic alliance and an arrangement. And I just bring that to your attention because if the mentee is feeling those things like lost, and they're looking to get out of their routines, or they're stuck searching for something, and the mentor doesn't meet them in that place, it's sort of like they're missing each other. And that's unfortunate, because from a mentor's point of view, when you're mentoring, because it's a two-way trusted strategic alliance, you want to meet them where they are so that you can then engage with them in ways that is going to be helpful, useful, eventful. And what happens often, and I've talked to the mentors and I have talked to mentees as well, and having been a mentee myself, I understand that, is that if the mentor doesn't arrive meeting the mentee where they are, then the mentee may call into question if the mentor is ready, able, willing to even mentor, because they're going, something's not quite here. And they might know it consciously, but they could be picking it up non-consciously as well. And then they might express it, and that expression may come through body language, not necessarily in the conversation that you're going to have, but they certainly are going to feel it. And that's why you need to pick it up as a mentor, what is presenting from the mentee to you, because of how you presented yourself to the mentee. And therefore, that brings up this whole notion of the connection, the relationship that you're setting in motion with the mentee. And it's really about the who of the mentor meeting the who of the mentee for reasons of being. So let me just share that with you a little bit more, because we actually did a video on this notion of being together, this idea of being fully human, being natural, being planetary, being Solaris. Because the connection is an opportunity for both a mentor and mentee, because it's a two-way trusted connection, is to be able to share their being and what they're looking for in terms of being something that they're not at the moment, or strengthening, improving, focusing what they're being at this point in time. So there's a lot to be said for the who of the mentor meeting the who of the mentee, and finding a way in which to celebrate that, weave that together, navigate that with each other. Now, what happens here is each person, mentor, mentee, has a within and without. So let me speak from myself at this point in time, and let's say that you're the mentee, that you're listening to this. As a mentor, I have a within. There's things that go on inside me about how I live my life. And then there are things that I talk about, ways I demonstrate, the actions that I take. That's the without. You have the same, is that there's a within with you and there's a without. And what we're often doing is we're meeting those withouts, but they're backed up with the withins. And what we're attempting to do is, when we bring those two, your without to my without, we're looking at what's going to happen between us and then together. So usually the between status of this connection is when you're first getting started. In other words, you're learning to dance with one another. And as you get better at this dancing, you spend more time in this connection, this arrangement, and you start to build up this relationship. Then what you're able to do is often dance other kinds of dances with grace, and that's really fun when you get to that point. And that's what I call the together component. So let me just share that again. So there's a within, without. When I work with you, there's a between so that we can get together. And what that allows us to do is go to the sense of beyond, which is where we're starting to take it, and we're working, interacting, appreciating, celebrating each other as we figure out what we can do for the world, with the planet, and from the whole. Now, what's interesting here is in the title, it was also about feel disconnected. Now, the notion of feel, there's two ways that I look at it. And in mentoring, there is this notion of to touch, right? And it's the physical aspect of touch. And that's where something of a boundary may have to be put in place. Sometimes people will reach out and touch someone to say, I understand what you're talking about. That's the notion of feel to touch. But there's the other aspect of feel, which is to interpret the emotions. So if the mentee is coming from a place of lost or lonely or searching for something, then there are emotions that are associated with that. And as a mentor, to be able to interact with it is to actually have the mentee share their feelings, to interpret their emotions. Because when they do that, you've got more information to work with, to interact with, because the mentee is then giving the emotions a name. And then what you can do is guide the mentee to figure out what action they want to take, and therefore to open up the conversation more. In other words, that between becomes together, beyond. And that's a really wonderful component of it, is when the mentee actually gets to name it, figure out what action that goes with it, and to open up the conversation more. And guess what? That's the same thing for the mentor as well. The mentor is going to have feelings. Maybe something that was said has a trigger prompt reflection that takes place for the mentor. And they have to then figure out what action might they take. And it might be with the mentee, or it might be something that happens afterwards. So again, because of this connection that is taking place, then it's important to really pay attention to the feelings that are there and to be able to express them. Which brings up the sense of the kind of conversation that you want to have. Now, remember, I used completion, conversion, and I used connection, conversion, completion earlier. This idea of connect, convert, and complete. So convert, conversion, conversation, there's a root there of an exchange that takes place, convert something to something else, conversation, to move ideas, insights, interpretations, investigations, and even interruptions. You're going to be sharing those. Now that can happen in a formal way or an informal way. So in the mentoring connection, sometimes the conversation starts off a little formal at the beginning, and then it becomes a bit more informal. And that's whether you're using technology or you're in person. We can, through technology, even using something like a Zoom meeting or a Skype, is to be able to get to a point where the conversation, all right, has informality to it, because it's there, because you're opening up, you are being vulnerable. These are ways in which the feelings of connection can be there for both of you. And it's arriving at this togetherness in the mentoring connection through conversation, that once you realize that and you're experiencing it, you have the extraordinary experience of that, it's so wonderful. And I know when I find myself in that place with mentees, it's almost like this whoosh, a really technical term, I know, this notion of a whoosh that comes through me, that I go, oh, we arrived at a point where the conversation is so open, and we can both be vulnerable, and we're connecting in ways to get at this notion of truth and worth, so that we can get to ideas of useful and utility kind of a thing. It's just such a beautiful, and if you've ever had a chance to experience that as a mentor, I'd ask that you go back in and tap into that, step back into that shoes, into that time, and see where that happened for you. And even if you were a mentee, see if you can get back into that as well. That's why one of the things that I do is I often write about my mentor experiences and my mentee experiences, so that I can dig into them. And as someone who likes to write and then share, I find ways in which to do that, to write and share. And there's a document that I wrote about the 4 main mentors that I've had in my life. I'm actually going to probably update that and put my 5th one in, so that I have a record of it. And I often share it. I don't necessarily put it out like a book or anything. But if you wish to read it, then you can just ask in the comments section, and I'd be happy to get or give you the link where you can pick up a copy for yourself. So this notion of getting together, and you feel as though the conversation has a togetherness, it's really coming from a place of like sharing and caring. Sometimes the beginning conversations when you first start off has a little bit of like telling and selling. I hope you can see that there's a connection there, there's a competition there, there's a collaboration, the use of those terms. It's not that telling and selling is bad, because sometimes you might need that at the very beginning. In other words, how to tell and sell the idea of how to set up a mentoring connection. And the faster you can then move into the sharing and caring, the better it will be for both of you. And therefore, what you're looking at doing is setting up what would be called a collaborative conversation. Now, a collaborative conversation is one in which, from a collaboration point of view, let's just take a look at it. Collaboration means is that you're assertive and cooperative. In other words, from an assertive point of view, you have confidence to share, to be able to speak from your head, heart, and hands. You're assured of what it is that you're bringing, and you're asking the questions. This is from a mentee's point of view, but also from a mentor's point of view, is that you're coming from that place. You're in that space and place to be able to have that happen. The cooperation component of it is that it's interactive, and that there is some sense of harmony there, is that there's some sense of flow. Sometimes in the beginning with mentoring connections, mentoring arrangements, it's a little bit less interactive, because the mentee doesn't quite know what is required and requested of them. And that's where the mentor can be of such great assistance, to show them how it is to become assertive, to have the confidence to ask the questions, to be assured that you will get the responses that will be of assistance to you, and to demonstrate what it means to be interactive and to have the sense of harmony that's there. And therefore, the collaborative conversation, when that is in full bloom, the music's there for the dancing between you. You're not just dancing one dance, you can dance many kind of dances. That is again taking it again to another level, that I've been hinting at as we've been going through this presentation. Now, the interesting thing is, I've been using the words place and space. And one of the things I want to do is just draw a little bit more attention to the notion of place. Place is often the formal foreground conversation, and space is the informal, the background conversation. What does that mean? Well, if you're having a mentoring conversation and you're in a mentoring connection, the place, the formal place you find yourself means that often there's a foreground conversation that takes place. Because if you're in a coffee shop, you're on Zoom here, it's a place. But when you can open up that place to make it a space, in other words, the whole space for the conversation, then there's more informality starts to happen. You can get into the background conversations that allows for more deeper and richer connection and therefore conversations to take place. So I encourage you is that when you're interacting with your mentee or mentee interacting with your mentor, whichever way you're looking at this, are you in a place or a space? And what can you do if you're in a place to move to space? And is there opportunities or a need or even a want to move from space to place? Again, the energy that goes with that is so important to tap into in this mentoring conversation that you're having. Now, as we move into this conversation, it's supported by the notion of safety, safe systems, and safer practices. And again, we did a little, not a little, we did a video presentation on this from a psychological safety point of view, physically, mentally, soulally, spiritually, and wholeversically. And I'll put a link in, or if not, just go to the playlist under Mentoring Lounge and you'll be able to pick it up. Now, when the conversation you're having and the connection that you are experiencing has safe systems connected with it, then that means that the process of mentoring, the best practices, the use of the inspired concepts are in full demonstration from a mentoring point of view. Then in many ways, you as a mentor are managing the mentoring process and the mentee you're contributing to it. What happens is that if you slip into coaching and still put it underneath the banner of mentoring, then what might happen is you might then confuse the mentee, dear mentors, or if mentee, you start to feel as though you're being coached and not mentored at the time, then get into the conversation to explore what's happening here. Where I'm going with this is when you mentor. If you're going to switch to coaching or instructing or facilitating, then declare that you're shifting your educating approach. It's an important aspect of mentoring because it's a two-way trusted. It's a benefit both personally and professionally. And you want to make sure that the collaborative conversation that you're having still allows for the asking of questions and the responses that go with it, not that you're coming in to all of a sudden shift the performance of the mentee, or you're coming in to make sure that a skill is given, or you have to learn something and get the why. No, mentoring is mentoring. So when you mentor. That's an important aspect of managing the safe systems of mentoring. When it comes to the safer practices aspect of it, then it's often about leading the safer practices for each of the persons and when you're together. Whereas the system is sort of what this place and space is about, the practices are the actions that you are actually taking so that you are engaging with one another, you're involving each other, you're evolving with each other. So one of the things from an IMC point of view is we don't come out and say there is one way to mentor. We will not come out and say that. But there are practices and standards that when you step into them from a mentoring point of view, which is why we have created this certification program so you can understand them, but sometimes the names that are associated with it. Let me give you an example, like pre, during, post, or before and as you move forward and afterwards. They're both sharing the same thing, but the language may vary depending on who you are. But the notion of the practices and the standards that go with them, they are wrapped up together, and doing it from a place of mentoring. To mentor is to mentor, and that's important to think about. So I think it's important here to also remind you, and I'm just thinking, I've had this conversation with quite a few mentors over the years, and they say to me, is there a one size fits all mentoring approach that we can use? And I had to think about it over the years. And then as I moved into what Doug and I are doing from the international mentoring community point of view, I realized that no, there's not a one size fits all approach. And that's because of the connection that you're establishing, the conversation that you're having with the person, and also the outcome that's required and requested of the mentee. Now, I'm talking about it from a mentor perspective here. And the use of required and requested is important here. Requested means that there's some wiggle room. So if there is some sense of outcome that the mentee is looking for, requested is understanding, well, where is some of the wiggle room? Whereas required is the mentee says, no, this is required of our connection and our conversation. In other words, there's no wiggle room. You need to understand what those two words are and how that is defined in the mentoring connection, in the mentoring arrangement. And that allows you to sort of bound up what is happening together. Because if you don't have that, it's sort of like the boundary is not there, so it's sort of flapping around in a sense. So anything can happen. And while this is helpful, it's not necessarily what's going to get the outcome for the mentee. I'm hoping I'm being clear there, is because there's no one size fits all. That's important for us to understand. And if we understand that and we open up to the arrangement and thus the connection and thus the conversation, then what happens is we can lean into completion. Remember, I used the online course idea earlier, is that you connect with someone, you convert them to get them involved with it. They may have paid some money, they're giving some time, they've opened up, but yet they don't complete. Why is that? And how do you get someone to complete? It's the same thing in a mentoring arrangement connection. Now, often we can get to completion because we're clear about the outcome. But make sure you're clear about the outcome, all right? What is required and requested for the completion? Because sometimes a mentoring arrangement, while each of you are benefiting from it, and both personally and professionally, sometimes the dynamics will shift a little bit, and becoming friendly with one another. And therefore, it moves into not necessarily a mentoring connection, but a friendship connection, and it's sort of taken outside of the boundary of mentoring. So it's being aware of that as a mentor and as a mentee, that when that actually starts to take place. Because as a mentor, and I'm speaking, yes, to you as mentors, the completion you're looking for, the outcome you're looking for, is when the mentee can say, I've gotten to the point of when I entered in, this is what I was looking for. I got my need, wants, desires taken care of here, and that's important to me, and I thank you for that. Then you can rearrange how you're going to interact with each other, start up a new mentoring connection, or maybe it's going to go into a different kind of connection. So what I encourage you to do, having gone through the video looking at, or this broadcast, looking at it from the perspective of connect, convert, complete, or another way of looking at that is notion of connection, conversion, conversation, completion, is listen to the video again and see if you can pick up some of the subtleties. What might be some actions that you can take, some concepts you can dig into a little bit more that will help you in your mentoring approach. In other words, being in service as a mentor to improve focus and strengthen your mentorship. In other words, the concepts and practices that you bring to a mentoring. And I would certainly encourage you to comment below and ask questions, and we can add to this. And if there's ways in which I can be of more assistance here, or Doug can get involved as well, then we would be happy to do that. So I just want to take us out with a remembering of what is mentoring. And mentoring is a two-way, trusted, strategic alliance, strategic connection, however word you'd like to use, that's using a collaborative conversation approach when and where both mentee and mentor benefit from these collaborative conversations, both personally and professionally. Also, that the time assigned for it is decided by the mentor and the mentee. Now, maybe at the beginning, the mentor might have a little bit more of a say about that, but as the mentoring unfolds, the mentee will start to contribute more and more around the time aspect. Also, there is the space and place aspect of mentoring and decided. Remember, the notion of place has a bit more formal, space has a little bit more informal. How is it that the place and space is unfolding for you? And that, again, just to remind you of the connection, the conversation, the completion of mentoring will get decided by both of you. It might start a little bit more from a mentor offering it, but you know that you're really into mentoring is when the mentee is contributing. So you're both your within, withouts are coming together through a between to a together to a beyond. And when you experience that extraordinary experience of that as a mentor, it's wonderful. It's a wholehearted experience. It's a place where confidence grows, and it's just, it's extraordinary. I can't think of a better word to put into it. It's moved past memorable and remarkable. It's into something that's worth writing about. It's worth, hey, singing. Hey, if you're dancing possibly. So one of the things that I would always encourage as you use the learning from these broadcasts is to travel well for yourself and to travel well with others, your mentees. And so that's the conclusion of the notion of the mentoring presentation. And I just checked to see if there's anyone left any chat notes. There's nothing there. So I mentioned earlier, I just wanted to update you on a few things that's happening with the international mentoring community. Three things in particular. One, we're updating the mentoring library. We're bringing in all of the presentations and we're putting them into the library for use. It's a pay for use, but it's lifetime access. So I think that's really wonderful. The second is that we're going to start bringing on some courses that are related to mentoring and related to the certification. One would be has a bit of a challenge flavor to it. In other words, you do it over 2 weeks and it leads you into the certificate of recognition. We're also going to create I would say it's probably about a 7-week course, which is linked to the certificate of achievement. And then what we're going to do is take a look at ways in which to bring more out for you in terms of becoming a mentor. So it's linked to the notion of the certificate of competence. And maybe you want to go into the certificate of competence associated with Journey Mentor, but you need the certificate of competence mentor to be able to do the certificate of competence Journey Mentor. We'll be updating you more about that certification stories as we move along. But keep an eye out for it. Jump into internationalmentoringcommunity.com so you can learn more about it. And the third thing that I would mention to you is that we're looking at opening up on a Friday at 10 a.m. Mountain, what might be called a circle, a mentoring circle, a mentoring gathering, a conversation. And we would keep it open for the first 15 minutes. If no one shows, then we would close it unless we are informed that someone is not going to come in until the 30-minute mark, then we'll leave it open. But Doug and I are going to open up opportunities for people to come in and ask us questions. And it would be on Fridays that it would take place, probably twice a month. We'll update you on the next video broadcast here in the Mentoring Lounge. Again, drop into internationalmentoringcommunity.com and you'll see the notices there, and you can click on and get involved with it and ask us questions that way. But again, you can always ask questions, comments below as well from the broadcast point of view. So I think that sort of covers off everything at this point in time. Doug will be back joining me again. Look forward to having conversations with you and to see if we can improve, focus, and strengthen your process of mentoring that you're using. Again, as I mentioned earlier, travel well for yourself as you gain confidence in your service as mentor. Travel well with your mentee as you connect and get into conversations and complete the mentoring arrangement with your mentees. So with that, I just wish you the best and take care, and we'll see you again next week. Wednesdays, 10 a.m. Mountain is when the International Mentoring Community, all things Mentoring Lounge, comes to you live off our YouTube channel and our group that's on Facebook. All righty, take care.